Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chakra Way Meditation Podcast. I am delighted to be welcoming back a returning guest. This guest was one of my favorite guests I think I've ever had because her work I find absolutely fascinating and very aligned with my work. So, my guest today is Inna Segal, and Inna is an author. She's the author of this incredible book, The Secret Language of Your Body, which it's sold over 1 million and is now going to be in 28 languages, which is pretty darn impressive. Um, so yes, today, who knows where our conversation will go, but welcome, Ina, and thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with
Yeah.
you, exploring.
So we before we hit record, we were just sort of having a chat. First thing I want to just like flag up is that Ina's going to be in the UK running a workshop in UK, European time zone. So in September this year. So if you would like to work with Ina, this is a really golden opportunity because normally she's based in Australia, so you'd have to be up in the middle of the night. But you can tell us more about that course and what is entailed in that later. Um, but I was fascinated to ask Ina, like, what's really lighting her up at the moment, and she basically mirrored back to me the only note that I'd written down for our conversation, which is a conversation around the masculine, feminine energies, but also in regard to ancestral. So tell me a little bit about what's been going on for you in the last year since we spoke, and what's really alive for you at the moment, Ina.
Mm. Well, I've been continuing to write a book that has taken a lot longer than I thought
Yeah.
because
Second that.
I have a perfectionist streak, and every time I think I finished it, I then read over it and go, no, I don't like it. I'm going to change it. I'm going to add things to it. And it's actually all about different stages of healing and really understanding that we go through these various stages. We don't stay in one. And
Mm,
unfortunately, people get so confused about it because they often stay in those earlier stages that are quite stuck. And so they don't necessarily realize that as you go further, there's more to discover, including what you just mentioned in terms of ancestry or understanding your soul's journey, understanding your spirituality, deepening things, deepening your relationships, and really going into, an exploration that requires you to have a much strengthened sense of self. So when your sense of self is weak, you kind of stay on the surface and you
mm,
run around to see everyone, but go, oh, why am I going round and round in circles? I'm not getting helped in the way that I want to be helped. I'm not where I want to be, as
mm,
opposed to that, foundational healing where you go, okay, I see where I'm at, and let me explore where I'm at and then build on it and then go to the next level with the realization that at times it's a struggle and it's challenging, because you're going deeper into areas that are uncomfortable. And
mm.
so whenever we go into discomfort, we
We shy
freak
away.
out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, this is really, I feel this and see this in my work as well. With myself as well, because we're all ongoing projects on ourselves, but with my clients as well, is that they get to this point where they're like, I've done everything. I've tried to do everything. I've seen the Reiki person. I've done the this. I go to yoga. I meditate, but they're still not creating that healing that they really are craving. They're not moving the needle in the way that they expect to be. So talk to me about these stages because I see this really clearly that it is a progression and it's sitting with the discomfort. Is that part of the I mean, it has to be part of the process. It's a big old chunk of the process, right?
Well, it is because, when you first kind of get onto that journey in terms of what you're talking about, where people are going, all right, if I do the yoga class, if I have some herbs or some supplements, if I go for my walks, I'm going to feel so much better.
Mm.
And essentially, what they're doing is they're trying to get something from the outside in. And usually it has its place without any doubt,
Mm.
but it will not make the difference that deep inner work makes. But you also have to be ready for that, which they're
Mm.
usually not. So we're in that, kind of place of, hey, save me, help me, I'm suffering. And so I talk about this stage as starting from I'm in suffering, but I can't see a way out, and I'm just kind of going, save me, and I'm the victim and, I'm pulling energy from everyone, but
Yeah.
cannot actually see a way out. Whereas, you know, you may stay in that stage for a little while or for a very long time, depends on, each individual person.
Mm.
However, as we get a little deeper, into that stage, we start to go, is this, you know, is this it? And usually you do go to all the medical practitioners during that stage, and you'll get all the tests done and things like that. But then, there's often this movement into stage two, which is, okay, I've done my medical stuff. I feel like there's more to it. Maybe I'll look at my nutrition. Like I said, maybe I'll do some yoga, maybe I'll do some breath work, some stretching, and so on. And this is where we start to build that capacity for being teachable. And I think that's one of the most important things, that if you cannot be teachable, you're going to just stay in that stage of suffering, right? And that
Yeah.
struggle. And I see that sometimes from the basics, like I had a message from somebody the other day, and she's offering advice, to do with marketing without me asking for that advice, without actually being a marketing professional. And I thought it's really interesting. Okay, I think my partner sent her message back, and she replied in this very attacking way. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna be gently, explaining how things actually work when you're somebody who doesn't understand it. Because I've been in this industry for a very long period of time. And, the message that came back was very much, oh, I wish I never, contacted you. And to me, it was like, I reread what I wrote and it was very gentle. It was like, you just need to understand that, we actually do a lot of the things you're saying, but not in the exact, black and white way that you're saying it. And when I read that message, my instant response is, this person is not teachable. They cannot hear anything except their own opinion.
Mm.
And this is the problem with, stage two, where you cannot get out of stage two until you expand your capacity to be teachable. And, some of my students who are practitioners have said to me, when they have a student, somebody who comes in to see them at stage two, they'll usually say, I want you to do this and that on me. And they're very controlling. They're basically coming in, to see someone who will help them, but telling them
What
exactly
to
what
do?
they should do, right?
Yeah, it's like
Which is
someone going to going to their doctor and saying, right, I've Googled my symptoms. This is what I've got. Can you just give me some pills for it? That's essentially what's happening here, isn't it? Yeah.
exactly, And so as long as you're trying to control everything, you'll never let go and go deep enough to create a change.
Yeah.
And so essentially stage two, and in the book I talk about how to become teachable. I gave an exercise for teachability. This is how you let go of your own concepts, because you cannot learn and expand and have a different experience as long as you know everything and nothing works for you.
Yeah.
And then when we go into stage three is the first time where we start to go, hold on a sec, maybe my illness is not some magical thing that happened to me without me having nothing to do with it, with me just essentially being the victim of,
Yeah, it just
my
landed from
own
outer
life.
space, kind
Yeah,
of. Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Unlucky, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I read this online all the time. I'm so unlucky. Well, really? Are you? Or, you know, did you contribute to this in any way or form? And so three is about recognition of this and moving towards responsibility. And I feel like I always have to explain this word responsibility because people are just so confused about it. And
Quite triggering.
immediately,
It's like, it's not my fault. What are you talking
yeah,
about? Yeah, but it's not
immediately
your
they
fault. It's just circumstances have, yes. Yeah, come on, carry on. It's brilliant.
right? Immediately it goes into the victim.
Yeah.
What have I done? And it's like responsibility when it is looked at from the healing perspective has nothing to do with what happened and what you did or didn't do. It has to do with, are you willing to look at what happened? Are you willing to discover the perspective that you took on that is not helping you? And it could be many perspectives
Mm.
from, all the different parts of you during the times where you became, traumatized or stuck. And from there, can you start to go, there is there is another way. There's another way to see this. There's a healthier way. The way that I've been perceiving and experiencing life is not helpful. So, how do I shift and adjust and move into that healthier way? So, you essentially take responsibility for the parts of you that have become stuck and stunted, and you're
Mm.
turning them around into parts that can grow again. And I think that concept is actually in so much psychology now. It started from Jung, and there's so many different ways that people in that sphere of counseling and psychology that are working with this already. So it's not woo woo crazy
Yeah.
anymore. It's
Mm.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, there's parts of, different parts of me. There's a child part, there is a feminine, there's a masculine, and so on. And so it's that going, I can do something about this, but not just I can do something about this, it's I can change my perspective and help parts of me that became stunted grow. This is what responsibility is. It's like you become your own parent,
Mm.
and so when that happens, you actually strengthen this sense of self. And that sense of self, I think we spoke about the chakras last time, lives for me in the solar plexus and in the third eye. And in the solar plexus, it's all about, you know, how I've seen myself in my younger years, how I was formed through my childhood, my teenage years. Who did I become in the 21st, sorry, in the first 21 years of my life?
Mm.
And in the third eye, it's like, who do I believe myself to be? What is my wisdom? How have I grown? How can I view the bigger picture of my whole life and see myself growing through challenging situations and actually building, one on top of the other. So they're a bit different. And obviously, the third eye is very visual. It's like, if I can see myself in a particular way, then I can envisage a completely different future for myself, as opposed to, if I don't have the depth of vision and I'm only going from my feeling center, which is the solar plexus, and from that, this is what my family and my, experience of the first 3 7 year periods of life, created. And so we're always kind of using both and going, what's my thinking and objectivity, and how much have I grown in my feeling area.
Mm.
So we have that. And in stage 4, we really start to identify these archetypes, or these parts of ourselves that have become stunted. And, we might start to learn about them, or we might jump from one to another, like the feminine, the masculine, or the inner child. But it's like getting to know them. And then when you get to stage 5, you're actually really honing in on them, and you're actually working with them. And because we're constantly moving through stages over and over again,
Mm.
when we get to this stage 5 again and again, we might start with those shadow aspects of ourselves, all the suppressed parts. And then we
Mm.
realize that actually we put a lot of the, strong and positive and creative parts of ourselves into the shadow as well. And so we kind of see the light side of ourselves, but the fact that we're not living that, we're not allowing that part to grow. So it's the light, but it's in the shadow still. So we start to work with that. And, and then as we get to stage 6, we start to have this build up to a release, to a change, and we start to see things much more clearly, where we go, okay, lots of things have been chaotic, but now I need to make certain decisions and changes that are both internal, but internal meets kind of external. So I might really feel uncomfortable with how I'm eating and what food I'm putting into my diet, but not based on something somebody else told me, based on my body. And I'm really listening to my body at this stage, and I'm communicating with it, and I'm hearing it a lot more, like it's shouting at me, and and I'm understanding it. So it's an uncomfortable stage, because here you start to go, I actually have to make some decisions. And your nervous system, needs to become quite flexible during this time. And when we're working on the flexibility of the nervous system, we have to face what's not flexible. Right? So we have to face all the parts of us that became rigid and stuck. And this is where the mirror really shows up, and you're like, oh my God, it's everything falling apart in my life, and and I don't know where I'm at, and all of this stuff that happens in stage 6. But it's like there's a sense that something's about to change, that we're about to have this transformation and a release.
Mm.
And then we go into stage 7, and this is where very often there is that kind of change and release. Like on the physiological level, we might get a fever, we might get sick, we might get an infection, or so we think, that it's just an infection. But it becomes very clear that the body's trying to release something. It can't handle things, it's changing. And there's a clarity that comes, and a vitality that starts to move through your body, where you just go, hold on a sec, I cannot live the way that I've lived. I'm
Mm.
going to change, but I have a lot more capacity for it. And all the things that you've been talking about for years and years, now you go, okay, action. Like I'm going to action this. And this could be, okay, now I'm going to go to a counselor, a marriage counselor, let's say, but I'm going to really research one. It's just not going to be anyone. And I'm ready, and my partner's ready, and we're going to work on this because I have the capacity. Or it's like your business, so you might move. There's a lot going on, but there's also this release that's happening. And at times, again, there's lots of things, because it depends on the stage you're
Yeah.
in and how many times you've really gone through this process. There might be, just a feeling of you're birthing something new, and everything that's ever worked before doesn't work now during this stage. And you really got to find your creative juices and go, I'm going to step outside of the norm and of everything that I'm comfortable with. And I'm really going to step up,
Mm,
and then there's usually this cleansing. There's a lot of tiredness often, and then there's cleansing and a release that is often both emotional and physical. And then we go into stage 8, which of healing, which is expansive. And this is where we go, okay, I'm so much stronger. What is my theme? And I feel like once you go through that process, you start to become very specific and you go, okay, where am I at in my life right now? What is my theme? So, is my theme ancestry at the moment? Is my theme relationships? Is my theme children? Is my theme inner child work? Is my theme business? Is my theme creativity? Is my theme spirituality?
mm,
What do I really feel like I need to do that's kind of the most important thing? But I've gone through a lot of the chaos and confusion. So now I can hone in and I have that capacity. And this is when it becomes really exciting. And then you kind of move around, but through that point of view of now I'm working on myself from this theme.
yeah. So it's I this is kind of aligned action is what you're talking about in this stage 8. You're taking action, but it's now truly aligned. Wow, Ina, there is so much here. I feel like I want to go right back to stage 1 and because stage 2 is what, like, when you're being unteachable. What was stage 1? Is this just the realization that you need to do this work? What is stage 1? Because I've written down all the
Stage
others,
one
but
is stage one is usually deep suffering,
yeah,
where
okay.
you're struggling. And I always say to people, we all go through it and we can be in there for a minute, but the the kind of shadow or the beginning stage of stage one is that nothing works and I'm in pain, I'm struggling. Look, help me,
Hmm.
save me.
Yeah,
Whereas the other part of it is I know I'm suffering and suffering is painful, but there's some reason for it.
mm,
So I'm suffering because there's some learning to do, there's
yeah,
something to really discover, there's something to sit with in terms of all the layers of this suffering.
yeah. No, I mean, everything that you're saying is absolutely resonates with me. This is exactly the sort of the trajectory that I also see, and it's such an exciting thing to see that development because, and what I love about what you said also is that it's not just one and done. You can't just go through this and go, oh, look at me, I'm like done,
Yeah.
finished the article that, arrived. Because you're going to have to go back and back because we have multiple stories. And the thing that's really kind of, I think, it is really interesting is this part 3, this like, oh, it just happened, but taking the responsibility and recognition of what it is that those stories are that have created the situation that you find yourself in. Because it's not always physical. Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's like, I cannot hold a relationship, or I cannot seem to get on with my work, or I just am, I'm trying so hard, but I can't become abundant in money or love or,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so it's these stories that are the absolute heart of what it is. And to actually really move forward. And also the other thing that I love is that my sort of method that I use, the this chakra method, I go from clarity, what is it that's going on, home, what's going on in your body, awareness, this is this, like, okay, what are the stories, what's happened, what is the story that you're telling yourself. Then for me a big part of it is kindness. Like, then we've got to be super compassionate to the self, like, before you can then begin to reframe everything and then take aligned action. That's my little very brief summary of the way I work, but it works. It's so aligned with what you're doing, Ina, that makes my heart very happy. But I'm also fascinated because Everything that you said is really so true. And I feel like everybody can recognize that part of themselves where, and I think we do when we start on this journey, a lot of people externalize. They're like, oh, I'm going to do a tarot reading, or I'm going to buy a load of crystals, or I'm going to sage myself every morning. And, there's these external things. But until you can turn inwards and go, oh God, I've just got to sit with this shit. I've just got to deal with it. That's when the real progress. And I did a rant on social media the other day about this kind of like the spiritual world, if you like, and this healing world. Like a lot of people saying, you know, projecting this kind of ethereal, wafty, yes, I just got my, I just waft around and crystals and this, that, and the other. I'm not saying crystals aren't great. I love them. I've got a pile of crystals right here. I love them, but they are not going to heal you. They are a support act. They are a thing that can make you remind you of, and give you a little bit of support, but they're not the real work because that is the dirty, it's ugly. It's, we're not ethereal higher beings who've suddenly had this awakening. No, we all have to live in this very human world with this very human suffering. We're here to have a human life. And so this part of this suffering and then working our way through that is an exploration. It's not something that we can kind of waft away. We need to go deep. And this is why I love your work, because you go deep.
I do
It's
go deep. And I just
really,
want to add to what you're saying because it is so important because we do have a lot of people who um who want to make out that there's a magic wand that does
yeah.
not require you to experience your own challenges and face them, and that somehow by getting out of the body or getting into some spiritual state or dancing,
Mm.
you can avoid this, and you can just go into joy or somehow. I actually, I think last year I had this message on Facebook again from this lady, and I found it again so interesting because she said something like, "Ah, I feel like your nervous system is dysregulated because of blah blah." And I actually just, I very rarely answer, but I'm just curious with these people, and I was like, "Have we met? Have you come to any workshops? Do you know anything about my work?" And she said no. And what was really interesting about this was that she made these comments based on, I remember now, it was a Facebook ad. And it was one of those ads that, like, I am busy in my life. Like, people don't have any clue of how busy I actually am doing things, as well as trying to balance things out with my own self. So I don't spend much time on Facebook. Like, it's not interesting to me. I
Yeah.
pay people to do that, right? And she kind of assumed, and I thought it was fascinating, that this ad that I paid somebody in England actually to write was somehow reflecting me exactly because this person made some reference to some other modalities, and honestly I did not even look at it because
Yeah, it's too much.
in
Yeah.
yeah, in what I do, I just try to stay in that lane of what I'm good at and not dysregulate my nervous system, but by doing everything
Yeah,
everywhere. I
social
don't
media.
believe in that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, as I kind of read that, I was like, do you realize that exactly what you're saying, that people who teach are not perfect? Actually, if I'm going to be honest, those are the people or who do healing sessions that have realized I need to do this a lot. And so I'm
Mm.
going to teach it and I'm going to help others because that reminds me constantly of the things that I need to do on
Yeah.
myself. But
Yeah.
also that, we're all going through different things in life. We all have family members, we all have friends. And even
Yeah.
though I might be doing really well in my life is balanced. somebody else in, my vicinity may not be doing well. So, of course, you know, those statements that people just throw out of your nervous system is dysregulated to other people are so damaging because
Mm.
someone like me, I don't care that you say that. I just find it funny, because it lacks depth, it lacks understanding of a person, because it's not about just your nervous system, it's about all the
Mm.
ingredients that would make you feel capable of dealing with life or incapable of it.
Mm.
But, do all of us have layers of, trauma, stuckness that we
Yeah.
don't even know? 100% we do.
But also the other thing is that we have a nervous system for a reason. The nervous system is going to be dysregulated probably once a day or twice a day. Like it's just a very natural human thing to have a dysregulated nervous system on occasion. So, I mean, that sort of broad statement of, oh, your nervous system's dysregulated, that's kind of a bit crazy. It's like they've just heard the phrase and they think they'll just throw it out there because it's really normal to have a dysregulated nervous system. What is not healthy is to have a permanently or frequently dysregulated nervous system. And also to be able to recognize when your nervous system is dysregulated and then know a couple of techniques to just bring yourself back into regulation. Like we all know that the effects of a dysregulated nervous system can have on you, but that's only if it's like that a lot and constantly. So it's a fascinating subject. And the nervous system is a subject that I'm really passionate about. I've just released a first aid kit for the nervous system, which is like all these little resets, which I love, just like little emergency band-aids for when you're just like overwhelmed and so on. But anyway, that's by the by. What I want to get into with you is these archetypes and this ancestral stuff. So I said right at the beginning that I wanted to talk about masculine, feminine, which
Mm.
is, very much left and right side of the body. And I find this in my clients and in my students as well. I find this endlessly fascinating because I have an idea about what I see in people's bodies and for example, when people are holding tension in their shoulders, when they've got painful shoulders, which a lot of people do. And I'm always interested whether it's the left side or the right side, because for me, it speaks very, very differently about what it is that they're carrying. So talk to me about this masculine feminine energy that we hold and what it means and how we can begin to understand it. Because for me, understanding this and going, oh shit, yeah, it's my left shoulder that is always bad. So I've been dragging something through from my past for a long, long time. What is it, this heavy load, this bag of rocks that I'm carrying? What is that? But it's something that in the past. And then if it's the right shoulder, it's like carrying something into the future, or there's a weight that I haven't. Talk to me about this because I know you know more than me.
I think there's just so many different aspects of
Yeah.
understanding it, definitely through the body parts and the chakras and the ages, and
Yes.
through actually, breaking down from that perspective that the feminine is connected to the heart, which is why it's on your left side. So it's not to do with the brain at all. Like
No.
that's a completely different thing, the right and the left sides of the brain. The left side of the body connects to the heart and the spleen. So, as the major aspects that show us feminine exploration.
Mm.
So, the heart essentially says that that is an area of how you feel about yourself, how you feel about life in general, your internal sensitivity, your intuition, because intuition actually does come from the heart,
Mm.
your ability to self reflect and change things from within, your ability to have relationships with other people, your ability to figure out what is my purpose, why am I here? What's
Mm,
it
mm,
about?
mm.
What am I doing with my life? So all of that is very much of an internal exploration.
Yeah.
It's also about that ability to listen, ability to be kind with yourself, like you were sharing. How do I be kind? How do I be more understanding? How do I be more gentle? How do I hold space? Right? So they're all about my internal capacity and intelligence and what's really going on inside of me. So
Yeah, it's that
can
sort
I
of
tune into
lunar,
my body?
that kind of lunar energy of softness and introspection and intuition and nurturing. That's how I see the feminine side. And it's not gendered, just to point out, it's not gendered, it's just an energy. Yeah. So,
And then you have, which is really interesting with the spleen, this is your whole feminine line is kind of held within the spleen.
is it?
So
Okay.
it's really interesting because it's connected to your blood, it's connected to your immune system, it's connected to, iron levels and all sorts of things inside your body. And it's based on the feminine line. And when we look at that, again, doesn't matter what body you're in, we're looking at when I was really young, say 0 to 7, what did I see around me in terms of feminine people who are around me, and how did they impact me? What did I absorb? Because you fully absorb things,
Mm,
in the first 7 years of life. You don't have a
yeah.
boundary or a barrier,
Yeah.
and then that timeline around 14, you go, so this is the feminine around me. How much of that do I want to embrace
Mm.
or
How am I going to
reject?
show up as a feminine being? At 14, you are working out. It's a incredibly complex time being 13, 14, because you are
Yeah.
beginning to become sexualized in our society. You're beginning to wonder about your own sexuality, but also how you present outside. And you are seen as somebody who could have a little bit of responsibility for themselves. So it's a big moment as a woman.
But also, as a man, you're still looking at the feminine and you're
The
actually
same
making
thing goes.
decisions, right? You're
Yeah.
making decisions about your self-worth. You're making decisions about, how you might treat a feminine partner in the future if that's the way you're inclined. You're, or just how you're going to treat others. You're focusing on how you treat yourself based on what you see with your mother and your family. And so I see this like, it's so interesting to break that down in yourself or even in relationships. Like when I was growing up, I saw my mum, my auntie, my grandmother, and then I also had this kind of vision of Madonna, I'm going to say, and they were competing with each other. And I remember thinking to myself around, again, 14, 15, so here I'm seeing my mom, and she's a little bit like a slave to my dad. She's not independent financially. She has to adjust all the time. I will never be like that. I was like, I cannot live like this. So, as my dad makes all the decisions, and she feels like a victim in her life. My auntie, even more victim. My grandmother had a very different type of relationship with my grandfather than, my mom and my dad at that time and my auntie and uncle. But she was still like, that person who just cooked and cleaned and, looked after her man. And so as I was watching that, I rebelled against that. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm going to
Taking the
say to
Madonna
quite
route.
yeah, to quite an extreme. Whereas it's so interesting with my daughter, she's more like, Mum, why did you go that far? Because she's much more balanced. And it was like, you don't understand. That was one of the first generations
Mm.
where we were like, we have Madonna and other women who are achieving things on a big scale to give us a vision of what is possible,
Mm.
as opposed to our mothers who, yes, they have jobs, but they're still not fully independent, and
Yeah.
they're still, not necessarily kind of empowered as a
Yeah.
woman.
And what that shows me also when I mean, it sounds like we came from very familiar, similar. It sounds very familiar to me, your family pattern. But what you need to understand is that, our mothers were taught by their mothers, who were taught by their mothers, and like this goes back generations and generations. We are all the product of a very, very, very long line of women. And the place that we've got to today is a result of all of those women. And some of those women were strong and they stood up for themselves and they were pioneering and they did things. And that will show up in you if that's in your line. However, if you're feminine line, which I think probably the majority of people will have been, where women were compliant and powerless and had to, in order to survive, because it was a coping mechanism, let's not beat around the bush, it was
Yeah.
a coping mechanism, um, to please and cater for the men essentially in their lives. Let's not go too far into this rant because we could really lose ourselves here. I could anyway. But we are a result of that long, long line of people who behaved in a certain way in order to survive. And now in this era, we don't have to behave like that to survive. But there's also the flip side of it, which is a lot of women are taught that you can have the career and have the parenthood and have the friendships and have the life, but also there's still that domestic burden that still sits on most women. So it's a burdensome time when we can actually have it all, because it's very, very difficult to have it all. That's my observation, and I don't expect everybody to agree with you, to agree with me. But yeah, I think that this, and so yeah, I'll let you say what you want to say, and then I want to move on to the masculine side as well.
Yeah. Well, there is so much confusion now actually around
Mm,
this as well. And so there's, like you're saying, it's so layered and we carry it. And that's why there is confusion, because I feel like in my generation, and I'm in my 40s, people are like, okay, we have a choice. We can, like you said, have it all. But at the same time, having it all has been overwhelming for a lot of
yeah.
women, because actually maybe we can't fully have it all without having a breakdown, a nervous breakdown when we're trying to do too much.
Mm,
And my daughter's generation, and she's 22, is now kind of going, well, you know, she says to me at times, she's like, Mom, you can't win because now women can kind of do everything. But if you are, a businesswoman, you get judged. If you're a mother, you get judged. If you don't put makeup on, you get judged. If you put makeup on, you get judged. She's like, we're in this society where you almost can't win. And I've had to
mm,
say to her, you got to come back to yourself and literally
yeah.
go, I am my own, kind of guide here.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of mental illness and emotional illness coming from this, and I just did want to say before we jump over to the masculine that
Yeah.
in terms of a masculine person, like a young boy or young man at, 14, 15, going forward, again, how the mother has treated them has such a massive impact.
Mm,
And I can see this literally in every partner that I've had. I can see that in my, in the partner that I'm with now, his mum was like a superwoman, but she was like the queen of practicality and the queen of, the household. And I actually talked to her about this last year when I was in the UK, and she said to me, I own that I'm a house goddess. And when she said that, there was a part of me that was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's like my biggest nightmare in
Yeah.
some ways. And it's so interesting because most people in my life think, you know, from everything from, how I think to what I do, from spirituality, that I'm super practical. But my partner's like, you're so not practical. And I was like, what do you mean? What does that even mean? Like, I don't understand what you mean until I went to England and I had met his parents before, but it was there watching his mum. And it was like, from the minute she woke up, she ran downstairs. She made breakfast and food for herself,
Mhm.
her husband, everybody else. Then she did her own washing and everyone's washing. Then she ran to the shops and like got food from the shops. Then she put everything away. Then she cleaned up. Then she put like the washing
Yeah.
outside. There was no moment where there was no practicality. And I just sat there at one point and I was like, I cannot breathe watching this. I was like, do you ever stop? And she was like, no,
No,
only
no.
when I go out with my friends.
Yeah. My mum's exactly the same. She's 84 and she's all day, every day, doing exactly everything that you said, cooking, cleaning, looking after everybody, doing the washing, doing the ironing. And I find it absolutely exhausting to watch. And it's an
I know.
exhausting um, model to have to kind of feel like, oh, you've got to not I don't feel I've got to live up to it, but it is a common thing. But the wonderful thing about that, about your partner's mother and my mother, is that they own that with a kind of a pride and are like, yeah, no, actually, what I do is really important. And what it does is it supports the people around me. They feel loved and supported. I feel like I'm doing a good job. Like it's not a demeaning thing. Like for the women who choose to do that, it is actually very powerful because you realize actually how much power there is in making everybody else's life easy and pleasurable and putting food on the table and, you know, giving them clean sheets on their bed or whatever it is that is a really nice human pleasure, a sort of necessity. But yeah, not all of us are built that way. But I think hopefully what we're evolving into is a place where that choice to make that choice to be that, that support, that domestic goddess, if you like, or go out and have an amazing career and change things in the world. Like both are equally powerful and valid and needed, but trying to do everything can send you slightly crazy. I think that can be really hard work. That's my
And
observation.
I think that's where the confusion is
Yes.
both for the feminine people who've watched this and the
Mm.
masculine people who also grew up with this,
Yeah.
where, there's almost like you were saying, the pressure and expectations and guilt and shame that we could be carrying in the feminine that
Yeah.
actually freezes the feminine inside of us because we don't know which way to go, which is the right way,
Yeah.
because we're trying to be everything. And
Mm.
this is the deepest challenge I feel for both, the generation that I have grown up with and also the new generations that are going, how much do I do? What's a balance? What's healthy? What's unhealthy? How much do people help? And again,
Mm.
we're talking about practicality, but on an emotional level, that can also really shut you down and stunt you because there is, depends on what you saw from your family. You may not recognize anything else. And my partner and I had this really deep conversation the other day where, I said to him, your family is really practical, but they never had honest conversations. They never,
So
talked about
English. Yeah,
emotions.
no, no, we
You
don't
know,
talk about
I'm
that.
like, in
Yeah.
fact, they did the opposite, which makes you go, oh, I'm so uncomfortable with this. And then you don't value it because it wasn't valued at all in your family. And we
Mm.
had to really sit with this and, and go, and he was like, well, how was it in your family? And I was like, well, it was very different in a sense because there was definitely value in those things, not to the degree that I have created that in my own family, in my own life, but absolutely there was way more value than, what you've seen. So we need to understand each other in this way. So it's that thing of, you know, the challenge of figuring this out where it's not
Mm.
clear cut can shut down your whole feminine side, and your whole left side of the body can become frozen, frozen shoulders, getting a stroke, having issues with your knees and not being able to walk,
Hmm.
properly when you're trying to do something creative because it's been shut down and not valued, because
Mm.
practicality was valued in
Yeah.
and seen as femininity, the hip area of carrying everybody on the hip, the spleen, like I said, with all the deep trauma that hasn't been transformed, the left kidney with all the, fear and worry and emotions that get, that you carry from your ancestry. So you
Yeah.
have all of these things going on. If we're going to talk about reproductive system, the left ovary, you know, connecting to your sense of self as a feminine that's been confused and, and unclear, and often, because we grow up in particular families, only allowed to express yourself in that particular way. So there's a lot that needs to be looked at here. And then we've
Mm.
got, let's go to the right side of the body. So you talked about moving forward, and it is a lot about the outside world, and it's like doing. So that is your doing
That
side.
is
And
your
I always
practical
say,
side. Yeah, that is. Yeah.
the feminine's like your creative side. But if you were to fully develop your feminine, you would have hundreds of ideas, but you never get anything done.
Yes.
Because the feminine will jump from one thing to the next, and it'll be like, oh, I'm so excited about this, or this is so interesting, but not want to get things done, which is why we have to develop both sides. And the
Hmm.
masculine side of us is all about, how do I navigate my purpose in my life?
Mm.
How do I support my family financially, emotionally, so that they're healthy, right? How do I leave a legacy, maybe? How do I figure out how to do things in a practical way? And if finances is a huge, huge part of the right side of the body, my relationship with my father, my relationship with masculine people and masculine role models. So, at work, who who runs the company? Is it me? Am I the boss? Is it somebody else? How do I take on that role? If I'm a feminine person, does it make me hardened and, more stiff in the shoulders and the neck area and the hip area? Or if I'm being told what to do, how do I take that? How am I being told? Is it loving? Is it not loving?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's so much here about what's my capacity to become really successful in my
Mm.
life,
Mm.
and then again, as we look at the different body parts here, you've got that shoulder of like, I just want to move forward. I just want to
Yeah.
get this done. When can I get this done?
Yeah.
Just leave me alone, everyone, so I can get this done. You know,
Yeah.
I've got enough on my plate. I can't, like, I'm carrying this whole financial situation here, and then you've got, like, I have seen so many women with tumors and breast cancers on the right side, and
Oh, really?
these are women who are just like doing machines and very,
Mm.
business-like, and it's like making decisions all the time, never giving themselves time
Yeah.
off to rest, to flow, to allow. It's just like on,
Yeah. It's a
and
lot of responsibility that we carry on the right side, I feel.
yeah,
It's the responsibility of the left is very much, it's a completely different type of responsibility on the right. This is a very practical, forward-looking, planning, and that can be really exhausting because you're gonna, it's a kind of, I'm just thinking adrenal burnout, it's like,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got to be predicting. You've got to be on a, and that when you're predicting, you're then on alert because you're looking for all of the things that could potentially go wrong. And so then your system, back to the nervous system, your nervous system is then on high alert. It's like, right, where's the danger? What am I looking for? Scanning constantly. And that in itself is exhausting energetically, right?
Well, exactly. And this is where you really got to be aware of. My favorite word of the year is capacity. What is your
Your
capacity
capacity.
in
Yeah.
this area,
Yeah.
and really, really allowing yourself to find a balance with the capacity and go,
Mm.
you know, what can I do? What can't I do? How much can I stretch? When's the time to focus back on myself? And so again, the liver is a huge liver gallbladder is a
Yeah.
huge, aspect that we have to look at, in terms of what did we take on, and definitely in terms of our relationship with the masculine people in our lives. Like
Mm.
when I was growing up, of because I was closer to my mom and I spent more time with her, I felt like she was the victim of my dad, and I
Yeah.
blamed my dad for a lot of things, but and absorbed it. But when I got older, I was reflecting as I'm teaching all this ancestry work, and I was really sitting with this because a lot of people have talked about how, their father or stepfather treated them, very critically. That's one of the things with the liver is
Mm.
this constant criticism. And I remember thinking about that and going, how interesting that in my whole life, I can hardly think of any times that my dad was actually really critical with me, or you know, where he put me down, because he really didn't much, but he was, harsh with his own self. He came from a harsh father and
Mm.
he was very reactive. So it was like, in terms of words, I never actually heard, oh, you can't do this, or you're stupid, or anything. Never, ever anything like that.
Yeah.
But I still kind of carried this thing for years,
Mm.
around, you know, my dad was the one who didn't, give or do the things that he needed to do. And so this is what I mean by the archetypes and our perspectives. So
Mm.
what we want to do is we want to work through the different stages of our inner child archetypes and go, what I experienced when I was a child or a teenager, is this real?
Yeah.
Is this really, what actually happened to me? I remember and I really encourage people to do that if they have an opportunity and they have parents who are alive, is to talk through the things that you believe about
Yeah.
your
Oh,
childhood.
it's a huge benefit. It's incredible if you are lucky enough to still have your parents around. And I find, like, that one can only speak personally. Like when I was growing up, my dad did not get involved with the kind of discipline. He was very silent on that. But the silence was more scary than if he'd exploded and been really angry. The silence was very, very powerful. But I now realize, no, and now he's getting older. He's nearly 90 now, and he's becoming more emotional and more emotionally open. But now I see that he just didn't have the capacity or the language to be able to have that kind of emotional connection with his daughters. Like it was, he didn't have any sisters, he had a very strong mother. Like, so you begin to understand, and that story that was attached to it, whatever that may have been, I can completely reframe that when I take the time to talk to him and see it from his perspective, to be in his shoes, to see that he was brought up by the war generation. His dad was in
Yeah.
the army, fought in the Second World War, was at Gallipoli. Like there was a hard-nosed kind of like we don't talk about this stuff because it is too difficult. And so therefore nothing gets talked about. It's that thing like, and so he found it really hard. Now he's softening in his old age. It's a really beautiful thing to see how much vulnerability and emotion there is in there. And I can see all of the stuff that was of the childhood from a completely different perspective. And it's really magical. It is.
And I think you just, you, when you do, you heal. And I do want to bring
Mm,
up, the parenting thing because for me, there was a moment where I really had to go, what does it even mean to parent consciously?
mm,
And how do I do that? And I had to take a year to do deep inner child work, but not just based on what my parents did.
mm,
It was to recognize where I found it difficult in terms of, what I felt they did not give me. And, my mum was absolutely devoted as a mother. She was there all the time,
yeah.
absolutely incredible. But it was like, how do I actually want to parent my children? And we went through a time where I didn't talk to my mom for a bit because I was going through this deep inner shift of who am I as a parent, and how do I want to parent my children? And it was very, very profound. I had to go through a lot of guilt because I was literally just so, I turned 21 when I had my son. I had no idea. I had no clue of what to do. And so, there was a lot of kind of going through it and trying to understand and forgive and change, because we don't
Mm,
realize that we actually follow a lot of the things that we see or we go against it, but so much of the experience is not conscious. So
mm.
it was very, very profound time for me to go, oh wow, this is, I'm doing this as a theme, in that
Mm.
stage 8 of healing, of going back through everything and all the stuckness, but from the point of view of who I want to be as a parent.
Mm.
And it was pretty,
It's a
intense.
tough,
So,
it's a really big one that because I feel like a lot of people, um, myself included, great, having a baby, wonderful. And then you arrive and you have all these great ideas about what it's going to be like. And then you're in the trenches, you are in what I used to call Nappy Valley, and you are literally just surviving one day to the next. You are sleep deprived, your physical body is just like completely foreign to you. And so you go back to, instantly default to what you, you don't even have time to think about it. This is like newborn, new parents. But then that kind of continues. You are just still kind of dealing with what you can deal with on a daily basis and the new challenges that throw up. So it's not surprising that we default to what we learned, what we were, how we were parented. So to have a really conscious awareness and, reading books and listening to people and working with people will shift that awareness. You bring a bigger, a newer sort of clarity and new ideas into it. But honestly, when I look back, when my kids are like 26, 28, I wish so hard that I could go back in time and take what I know now back into when they were little teeny tiny babies. I really do. But the damage is done. I apologize to them frequently, and they are very sweet about it. But this masculine side, I want to talk about the liver again on
yeah,
this right on the right side because traditionally the emotion that I associate with the liver is this like anger and
yeah,
resentment. And that is a very kind of masculine energy. It's a very outward thing, isn't it? Inside, when we're in the spleen, we're kind of it's more of an introspective, but this is a very extrovert emotion, anger, isn't it? It's an archetype that I don't know. I'm just interested to know your perspective on this.
Well, there usually is a lot of anger if you
Mm.
had, challenging relationships with the masculine, including your own. And it's about so many different things because you may have had a really loving father, but he was not there for you when you needed him. And
Mm.
so there could be anger around that or a feeling of neglect,
Mm.
or feeling like his work took him away from you. So, I had really interestingly, I was speaking to somebody recently and he had his gallbladder out. And I said to him, we were talking about, his teenage years, because that's the area to do with your teenage years. And I said to him, so what was your relationship like with your father around this, age of around 14 and so on? And this man was very creative and he said, yeah, I just felt shut down, like he didn't believe in what I was doing, and I felt so angry about it, but I just pushed it down,
Mm.
and so, and then I have a really good friend who's just had her gallbladder out, and her relationship with her partner is very challenging in terms of that masculine feminine lack of communication, lack of understanding that happens when you're married for a long time with people and you don't really have tools for it and or desire for it, or you just have, like you said, children that are a struggle that you're bringing up and you're just you're in survival mode. They're not in nappies, but they're in their teenage years and you're surviving, and you're
Yeah.
just potentially staying in a relationship, that you wouldn't be in if you weren't in that situation, or, if you, I guess, like there's often not that capacity or time or desire from both people to really work on it, or you've just got into really, really bad patterns.
Mm.
And again, suppressing. So one of the things I see in relationships with so many people is just suppress, suppress, suppress. So they actually don't know they're angry.
Yes.
They have
Yeah,
no
until it's
idea
too
they're
late.
angry.
And that anger pokes out in all sorts of horrible different ways that you do not want. Anger is the most dangerous of things, which is why I advocate getting angry, but in a safe play, in a safe way. I think it's really important to, but also I think that in terms of, if we're talking about being a woman and feeling anger and holding that anger with the masculine, it's not necessarily always to do with the father. Like you can have a lovely dad who was there for you, but you can have some pretty horrific experiences with men in from 14 onwards, and even before, like, and just general society in general, culture in general, the masculine side of that can make you really angry. I don't think I've ever been angrier with the masculine than I am currently, actually, like as a broad stroke,
Yeah.
thinking about all of the ridiculous leaders that there are in the world and what they're doing through their unbelievable egos and just literally, anyway, that's a whole nother situation that I let's
Definitely
not go
going around.
let's not go there. However,
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand that your ancestral stuff comes from the generations that brought your parents up, from your parents, but then also, as you say, from there could have been a teacher that you had, masculine, man or a woman, a teacher in when you were 10 or something, who said something that really stuck with you, that said, oh no, you're not going to be in this group, you're not quite at that level. For that, and then that scuppered your entire, let's say, artistic creative side. Like I was told don't do art. Like I think at about the age of 13 I was told no, you're not good at art, so don't do it. And I held on to that belief for decades and decades. Yeah. And when I did
Absolutely.
unleash my creativity, the effect that it had on my wider life, as in my business and my relationships, like, ooh, that was quite a big shift. Just by doing something vaguely creative in an intentional way, really shifted the needle. It was crazy, but I'd suppressed
Well, it
it.
is, and it's cultural as well.
Mm,
It's That's why I always say to people, where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where are you living now? All of those factors
yeah,
have a huge impact on
yeah,
you because, what was going on in that country, how were, women, men treated, what did people believe? Like I
yeah.
had this whole thing. My dad always used to say things to me where, like my mom would say, no, you can't have this. And he would whisper to me, well, even if you can't have it, but if you really, really, really want it, you actually can have it. So you need to figure out if you really, really, really want it, and it was one of those things that he would say to me from
I
childhood
love
that
that.
completely kind of changed, my whole trajectory on things because I would then go, you know, hold on, let me connect to my heart. Is this something that I really, really want from my heart? And just because someone else is saying I can't have it, does it mean that I can't have it? Or can I actually have it because I really, really want it? And,
Mm,
I think that it's all of these things are so important. Like because he said this to me, I had a similar, experience to you at school, and it was actually female teacher, and it started with, I came to this school in year 11, and I know you have different time like
yeah.
years, but like we have year 11 and 12 as the last years here in Australia. So I came in the middle of year 11, and she was a teacher for literature, which, in the previous school that I had been, which was a private school, I was given C pluses for everything to do with my English. And then we found out that the only reason was because I wasn't born in Australia. It was like the teacher wouldn't even read my work. He just put C plus. And, for all of my friends, which then made me leave that school. And then I went to a public school and I wrote an essay and gave it in. And then I was told that I had to have a test because I plagiarized it. This is before AI, right? Or even any computers. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, I did not plagiarize this. I wrote this myself. And then I had to, yeah, do a test. And I was so affected by it. And then I got an apology that I was like, I cannot be in a school that can't trust that I have a capacity to write. And so then I within literally a year, went to the third school. And, this teacher was very supportive and she really gave me, great insights. And we talk and, she gave me, the marks that I deserved. And
Mm,
so that gave me that opportunity during school holidays to go out of my way and interview a film writer who was nominated for an Oscar, which hardly ever happens in Australia. And it was just
wow.
incredible. I was 17 and I, went out of my way to find him and to, interview him. And then on the first day of year 12, I was so excited. I came to school. I was like, can you check this? Because I'm about to, put, like send it out to different magazines and newspapers. And I remember by the end of the day, she said, okay, I need to meet you in the library. And so we met in the library, and I'm excited because I'm like, no one else at school has gone out of their way and, done that and,
Mm,
at that age. And, she just looked at me and she said to me, hey, this is the biggest load of shit that I've ever read. And she just broke me. Like,
oh
I
my
literally
God.
had heart palpitations, anxiety afterwards. And that whole year, she went from being a real, like, very supportive teacher to breaking me down, commenting about my hair, commenting about, like, daily, making just, yeah, horrible comments. I had the articles published in some pretty great magazines and a newspaper. I brought it into the class that I had with her. Actually, I ended up having two classes with her, and you know, again, it was a girls' school by that stage. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's amazing! Wow, Inna, yeah, And she said she came into the class and she said, "Oh, mustn't be very high quality magazines if they would publish what you showed me." In front of the whole class.
Wow.
To which I just sat there and stared at her if looks could kill, and refused to do anything that class. And then she said to me, "Is there anything you want to say to me?" And I was like, "No, just the principle about your behavior. This is absolutely not okay." And so I had a conversation with the principal, and then you know she she calmed down a little bit. She gave me a mark that I didn't deserve at all because of this, which brought my whole kind of score down, and then again we had this conversation about what are we going to do in the future, and she said, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to do acting and I want to write books." And she said to me, "The same as you heard." She said, "Well, acting is equivalent to prostitution and you'll never make any money writing books, so I think that you should find something productive to do that's not the things that you want to do." And I said to her, "Well, now that you've mentioned it, I'm even more excited to do all those things." And yeah, it was just this battle, and because
Mm.
of her marking me down, I didn't get the marks to go to university. And she, again was
Yeah.
happy about this. And I said to her, "But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send the work that I've done for you to the university, and I'm pretty confident I'm going to get in." Which I did, and they said, "Yes, definitely, that's fine. You didn't get the marks, but we still want you because your writing's amazing," and so on. So, I ended up going and getting into the course because of my own, you
Because
know,
your own tenacity.
yeah, my own
Yeah.
tenacity. But it was really hard to handle, like being again, in a new country. And yes, of
Mm.
course, it was a lot harder for me to, to speak English than somebody who's born here. But I worked harder, and to have, several teachers put you down and try and put you in your place because you weren't, an English speaker from birth was really interesting, as an experience. And I think that, again, so many people have those experiences and they internally kind of just shut down and go, "Oh, okay, I'm going to believe this person."
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah, no, and
things,
energetically that will have had an effect on you. And I remember from our conversation we had last time when you were on the podcast that we talked a lot about, your health journey and like, there was a very undescribable like you couldn't work out, the doctors couldn't work out what it was that was wrong with you. And you had, was it back pain, really bad, but
yeah, I had really
all
bad
sorts.
back pain, which is
Yeah.
again interesting, that whole area and what it's about. But I had psoriasis because I just did not feel okay to be in my own
Yeah,
skin.
exactly.
Uh,
So
I,
all of these things
yeah,
that inform our energetic body and inform our physical body, you've just described like a whole sort of saga of ridiculousness that and it just makes me it makes me very angry. Oh, my liver's really activated this morning. And angry about all sorts of things. But it's very it's, I hope that this story sort of serves to illustrate to people that these things that happened to you in your past, like, who knows? Like this teacher, what she was going through. Like, let's just imagine that she was having a
well, she
horrible
ended up
menopause.
getting
Like,
cancer. So
well, there you go, full
whatever
of,
she went
yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on for her. Like she's not doing it because you're an awful person, but it makes you anyway. The point is that this work of going back into your life
through.
and really unpicking and reframing all of that. Yes, we can see the injustice of it. We can see the horrible time that you had, but then you can also track that through to having a bad back and psoriasis or whatever it is. But in that understanding, that's, I mean, I guess that's phase six, I think maybe of your
Oh yeah. And it's that thing of as soon as you recognize it from that place of taking responsibility, you can turn it around, and that is the moment of you taking back your power, and then you have choice.
Mm,
Because then, at one point I was invited into actually several schools, and one of my biggest things that I talked to the students about was, doesn't matter what the teachers say. What does your own intuition say? What does your own inner feeling say? What do you want to do? Because you actually don't know where it will lead you.
mm,
If it doesn't lead you into a career of whatever it is you thought you were going to do, it leads you, because I honestly, I thought I was going to write fiction books. I thought that I
mhm.
was going to write TV series. I thought that I was going to act in them. I absolutely had zero clue at that point that I would be doing healing work and teaching people about that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, you don't know, but it, by recognizing it, turns around. And I just want to say one more thing about this, anger. I feel like we often have anger when we feel a bit helpless, where we go, I'm
Mm,
so angry about, like you said, the government or the situation or so on. And for me, that has always kind of been turned into education. I've gone, I can be angry because I'm seeing things over and over and over again that make me angry, or I
mm.
can learn from it and turn that into passion and
Yeah.
turn it into, like, I want to educate as many people as I
Yeah,
can
exactly. You know, the
about
understanding of it, that understanding and that um seeing it, and it really is just that seeing it with perspective. I think when we're close up to things, they were like, oh my God, this, we really react strongly. Allowing yourself and giving you the chance to see things from perspective, with perspective, is a very, very healing process. It allows you to see. But, as I've said many times before, this work, which, you've described, that I've described my sort of way that I work, it's a very difficult thing to do this on your own. And I think that doing it with support is incredibly valuable. You don't have to have some master guru there for you. Those are all in books and podcasts. You need to have somebody who can just see what you can't see that perspective, hold accountability, hold space, hold up the mirror. That's the key of this.
And if I can expand on this, because
Hmm.
again, I was having this conversation with a close friend just recently, literally hours, ago, and we were talking about how, people will go, well, I'll get a book and I'll get ChatGPT to guide
Yeah.
me through this.
Yeah.
And they'll say, I've done the work. And it's like, no, you have not done the work. You don't know how to do the work just through reading a book and to do it on your own. Because very often you need someone's eyes, you need
Mm.
someone there, or you need somebody to literally guide you through stages of different aspects.
Yeah.
So maybe you could get a course and have some other support, and that can guide you, but just having, a book and nothing else, even though I know, my book, The Secret Language of Your Body, has helped so many people, but I'm like, it still would help you so much more if you had deeper guidance and deeper understanding of what to do.
Mm.
And, at times, a person there that you can, you know, talk to and go, this is what I went through. Can you
Yeah.
relate to this, right?
Yeah.
Just to acknowledge it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, we are community-based beings. You know, we are designed to live in communion. We have developed this incredible skill of communication, not only verbally, but physically and energetically, spiritually. You know, we are all connected. And so trying to do this work in isolation um, is not going to get you far. It will get you someplace. You will get some understanding, but you're not going to get to this place of real freedom and choice and clarity where you can just enjoy the things of being human, whether they're, you know, wonderful or awful, because they're always going, you know, that's that's always going to happen. There's going to be good stuff and bad stuff. Um, but yeah, listen, you know, we've talked for another hour and a half, and I'm so grateful for your time. I feel like we could do a part three. Let's meet up for a
Good.
part three in another 6, 8 months or something,
Yeah,
because I feel like
sounds
I could
good.
talk to you for so, so long. We've got yeah, we've got so much that we could go into. Like, you know, we could spend an hour just talking about all of the different archetypes. Like, I would love to go into parts work with you, you know, and
Yeah.
talk about all of that, because I think that is such a huge piece of this work. Maybe we'll do it sooner. Maybe we'll do an archetypes and parts thing at some point very soon. Um, Anything you want to leave my lovely listeners with on this day today, and what any little message do you have?
I think that, it does start with making a decision and, you know, um, and finding the right guidance is so, so vitally important.
Mm.
So I feel like, for those who resonate with me or with your work, look us up and and I I do a lot of kind of preliminary workshops and masterclasses that give you the overview of things and then guide you through very simple processes that make you go, oh, okay, this is what it means to do a process. This is what it means to prepare to do a process. This is what it looks like and how this actually works when I can close my eyes and sit or stand or lie and be guided
Mm.
so that you can really start to go into yourself and explore. And I have so many of these on my website, innasegal.com, which is INNASEGAL.com, where you can go on a journey. I'm literally finishing, and probably when this comes out, it'll be finished. A mini kind of series of 7 parts to do with what we've talked about, to do with my book, and
Mm.
going through each stage, and and then I give exercises for people to do in this in this mini series that I think in pounds is like something like 40 pounds,
Mm.
that people can just, it should take around 7 days for people to experience, just half an hour here, an hour here, and so on,
Mm.
but guides you through connection and understanding of things in a really deep way and several processes. So there's so much support there. And I do hope that people visit, my website, sign up for a newsletter for when I do all sorts of different events, and
Mm.
we send out cards of the week and, bits and pieces from different processes that people can do or different understandings regularly. So just as reminders and as ways to go, oh, let me explore
Yeah.
this.
It's nice. It's
So
nice to have that to kind of keep you on track and to remind yourself to do the work every so often. Yeah. So that's innasegal.com, and all of that stuff is there. Thank you, Ina, for your time. I'm so grateful because your time is really precious. So I appreciate you spending the time with me, and we will be back. So thank you so much
thank
for
you.
being here.
And just a
Cool.
reminder that those who are in the UK or
Yeah.
Europe who hear this, Please do get in touch if you want to experience a really profound deep dive workshop with me.
And that's in this coming September in the
Yeah,
UK. Yeah.
2026.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ina.
Thanks.